music composers and their spiritual legacy. I'd like to welcome you to this very interesting discussion of things that we're using today that came about so many years ago. I've been surprised by the fact that we are now in the 21st century, yet we are using inventions that were created by those who lived much earlier, 13th, 14th centuries. I wonder if those who lived at that time ever envisioned that things that they created would have such a lifespan. The same I am referring to music as well as art. When I would visit the art galleries of Europe and see the talents of those who lived much earlier, centuries, I often would ask myself, did they ever imagine they had created something that would still be useful and admired hundreds of years later? This is the 21st century, and yet the church is still singing music and tunes that were created much earlier. Do we know anything about these composers that lived much earlier? Or do we know anything about these tunes? We still use their music, and the church has managed to preserve many of the early tunes. I think it's important that anyone discussing music should know that there are 6 periods of music history, and the very first one is called the Middle Ages. The dates are 450 to 1450. The next is the Renaissance. And if the Middle Ages was religious, the Renaissance is non-religious. Renaissance is 1450 to 1600. The next is the Baroque period. Well, if the Renaissance was non-religious, the Baroque period is religious. And it goes on. The classical period, 1750 to 1820, the Romantic period, 1820 to 1900, and the period in which we now live, which is the 20th century, and I should add to that the 21st century as well. Middle Ages and Renaissance would be considered Catholic. By the time of the Baroque period, England, Holland, Denmark, Sweden, Germany were all Protestant. What I should mention to you is this: the Catholic Church, of course, was first. The composers, when we think about music, we think about Vivaldi. Vivaldi was quite early, known as the Red Priest. And he has written some works that aren't necessarily used in hymns, but at the same time, being a Catholic composer, he wrote numerous other pieces, and one that is very popular are the 4 seasons. And the most popular of the seasons is spring. Perhaps I should play a little bit of that for you so you get an idea as to what piece I'm talking about. And it gets a little repetitious. So that must be in hopes that spring sticks around a little bit longer. There's a lot I can say about Vivaldi, but obviously he was Catholic. And he comes out of the city of Venice. If there's anyone here who has not been to Venice, you must go. I love that city. And I can see why Vivaldi was planted there. Venice, Italy, that wealthy city, and I'm sure that when you get to Venice, you'll understand. Vivaldi was a virtuoso violinist, and he was known as the Red Priest because his hair was red. He worked out of St. Mark's Church in Venice. If you ever get to Venice, you'll see that church because it's right in the center of town, and it's unbelievable to think that it has been preserved this long. Well, if you haven't guessed it already, the piece that I was just playing for you was called La Primavera, which translated means springtime. I think it's totally unusual that when people discover that he wrote this group of pieces called the Four Seasons, if you listen to the pieces, it actually represents, the sounds represent that particular season. So Vivaldi was Catholic, and I'm just merely saying that so that you realize if you hear any music by Vivaldi, it was actually meant for the Catholic Church, that is his sacred music, and it is quite different from the sacred music of our next period. The sad thing about Vivaldi is that he was forgotten for almost 200 years. And I'm so glad that they discovered that this composer added so much to our music that we enjoy at this particular time. And so I guess that closes off our comments for Vivaldi.